This is a video that a lot of you guys have been asking for, and it is how I color my videos. So I'm actually gonna break it down into 3 sections. Number 1 is going to be a heavy 35mm film emulation. Number 2 is gonna be a cleaner grade, and in the clip, the white balance is off, the exposure is a little bit weird, so I'm gonna kind of teach you guys how to fix things. And then finally, number 3 is gonna be a black and white clip, because I feel like a lot of people don't do black and white, or when they do, they don't push it as much as they should, or as much as they could, honestly, because it is very stylistic. First of all, I want to thank DEHANCER for reaching out to me and asking if I would make a video. It's truly an honor, because I've been dreaming about using their product forever, because it is the kind of industry standard for film emulation. So the whole video is going to be based on that, and I know a lot of people connect DEHANCER with film and that specifically, but I'm going to teach you how to get kind of a cleaner grade as well, something that you could use for commercial that's not super film heavy. This is actually Future Max coming in. I just finished editing the video, but I wanted to say real quickly, in the first clip I kind of explained how to do film emulation, but I also tell you all of the details of DEHANCER. So if you already know how to use DEHANCER and you're already familiar with that, you can just skip to shot number 2, and that's where I really get into the details of how to save your shot with the log wheels, the HDR wheels. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know that if you already understand DEHANCER and know how to do film emulation, just skip to shot 2 so you can actually learn something and not waste 15 minutes of your time. So let's get into it. So this first clip is a tight shot, and I like to start with just the Rec 709 just so I can see, you know, kind of how it looks in general. Like I can see it's pretty well lit, as we can see the scopes, and then it looks a tiny bit cold, but we'll fix that. So I like to create 3 separate nodes, and then I will come here and add DEHANCER. And as you can see, we're greeted with a kind of rough looking image, but what we will do is we will come in here, choose camera. I'm gonna do the Sony FX6, and this was shot at 12,800. We have the input, film developer, film, and then a ton of film effects, and we're gonna go through all of them. We're gonna add them all to the clip. So number 1, we have the input, and we can go and we can adjust the exposure, or we can do the temperature. Either works, but first you wanna come into film, and you want to pick your film stock. There's so many different ones you can choose. I am a big fan of Kodak Portra 400, Portra 800. These are photo film stocks. And then there's obviously there's so many. So if you want to do black and white or color or a certain film stock that you really like, it's probably in here. But for this one, let's just do CineStill 800T. It's another one of my favorites. And whenever I grade, I want to find the frame kind of like my master frame. It's a frame that shows you the most, so when you grade it, you can kind of average that out. So as we can see right here, this is fine, but we can't see his teeth, so we might kind of grade this whole image, realize his teeth are wrong. So I'll go through, I'll kind of just look around, and then I see, okay, I'm liking this right here because I can see his teeth, I can see kind of everything. So this will be my master frame that I'm going to grade the image off of. As you can see, there's a push and pull, and this kind of determines which side of the preset you want to be on. I'm going to go on this little bit warmer side. It's a little bit less. I kind of like how it's making it a little bit harsher almost, but also a little bit softer. And then we will go into the print, and I like to choose the Kodak Endura glossy paper. These are all just the actual film prints you can mess with. Cine on Film Log is right after you develop it, and then there's this print film and this print film. This is what most movies are printed on. But I'm gonna do the glossy paper. I like how it adds a little bit of contrast, and then we will come back through and fix it later. So now it's time to mess with the exposure. So I'm just gonna come in here, I'm gonna bring it up just a touch, that way we're not losing a ton of details. And again, for most of this, I'm looking at the waveform. It's basically a better way of showing where all the brightness is in your image and how it kind of levels out. You can see there's kind of all these different mounds, but if I bring this up and it starts to peak right here, that means it's just peaked, that means it's white. Same thing if we go low, see it all gets crunched right here, that means it's black. So I really like to make sure I'm using most of the waveform in general, because it's kind of a waste if you don't, and we'll get into that a little bit later on how to actually make sure you're using the full thing. This is looking a little bit better, a little bit brighter, and I kind of like to bounce between the print exposure and the actual input exposure, because I think they act a little bit differently. So messing around with both of them, I definitely recommend. And then we can mess around with the contrast a little bit, but I'm really liking this level of exposure. And then we will come into film developer, and this is where all your saturation is going to come from, because as you can see, this image right now, there's really not much. So we will enable this, and we'll come into color boost, and we'll just bring this up a touch, and now we can see, okay, there's all the saturation we need. And we can see that this is super saturated. Personally, I'm a big fan, especially because this is giving off the orange and the teal vibe, and the red I like because they're kind of that centerpiece. That's what you're looking at. So we'll go back. So I'm a big fan of this so far. I mean, you could go, that's obviously too much. So, we'll dial it back down. Right here, I'm really liking. And we can come in and boost contrast. And then the gamma correction is really nice because you can boost the contrast, but you can bring up the gamma correction and it kind of keeps things from clipping. So as you can see right here, down here, we have these clipping. So these blacks right here are definitely crunched. And we can go the opposite way. Now there's basically no blacks, no whites. But I want to have a little bit more contrast, so I'm going to bring this up a touch. And then I go, okay, well now I don't want the whole image clipped. So I'll bring this up a little bit. And now we have a little bit more contrast, but it's not clipping. So now that we have that done, we kind of have the basics. So what we'll do is we'll come into the compression. And this is if you basically want to keep things from, again, clipping. I'm a big fan of using as much of the waveform as I can. But you come in here, and the impact is kind of the total level of what this panel will do. Bring this up, and then the white point is basically determining how much the whites can range. So if you can see down here on the waveform, it's bringing them down and bringing them up. And if we look just right here, it's kind of hard to see, but it's kind of adjusting it a little bit brighter, a little bit darker. And this is just adjusting our white point, but right here is the tonal range. So this is gonna cap out what exactly is the highlights. So the more you bring this, the lower your maximum highlights will go in your image. Same with the other way around. If you bring it up, the higher. And this is definitely a style. This is more of like a Cineon style. I'm not a fan. I'm again a fan of using like your whole waveform. I'd probably use it like this, just a little bit softer, but not much. We're still getting a lot of the data. And then we have expand. This is one of my favorite tools ever because this really allows you to see if you're using the full waveform. So grabbing this is your black point. So this is gonna take your lowest points of brightness on your image, and we're gonna adjust those. So if you bring this up, 0 blacks, bring this down, it's all crunched into the blacks. So what I like to do is I like to grab it, see kind of where my clipping is. So it's a flat line, which means it's clipping. So I'll come down and I'll just set that right on the bottom, right there. And for this clip, it was basically already there, but you'll see later on why that's important, especially with the black and white. And then we have the white point, and this is basically adjusting the whitest whites, the brightest parts of the image. And normally I would go all the way up to here. However, as you can see in this image, there shouldn't be anything that is that white. So if you're shooting and there's something really bright in the background, I usually like to have it get as high as it can to where it's not clipping, but it's very bright. But for this one, we can maybe just bring it up a touch, but nothing crazy. So now we're right here. We just, again, have a little bit more contrast. And as you can see, we're kind of expanding our waveform just a touch. Also, I'm gonna move this mic. I keep looking over and I'm stressed that it's not gonna be capturing the audio right. So hopefully it doesn't look weird right here. Now that we're done with expand, we can head back into the print. We don't really need to do anything here, but I'll give you guys a quick breakdown. Exposure, obviously, then we have the contrast, and then we have color density. And a lot of you are probably wondering, like, what exactly is that? If you've seen film images, they have a very rich color scheme, and you kind of assume that it is saturation. However, it's actually the color density. Okay, I gotta move this thing again, bro. I feel like but it's not actually the saturation, it's the color density. So it's like the richness and the depth of the colors rather than just more saturation. So this is making everything a little bit deeper. So if you can see, we can look at his lips, for example. When we adjust this, we're adding saturation, obviously, but if you look at the waveform, you can see it's actually bringing things lower. Because it's not making them more red, it's making them a deeper red, so a darker red. So as you can see, it's bringing our waveform down just a little bit. So if you really want bright, dense colors, this is definitely what you want to do, is bring that up or bring that down. I would probably honestly bring it down a little bit because our image is extremely saturated already. And now we move on to the color head. And this is extremely important. Again, not for this clip because this clip is extremely stylistic. But this is basically how you can adjust the shadows, the midtones, and your highlights. Like as we can see over here, the highlight midtones are warm, but the shadows are cold. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come in here to shadows, tones, and we're gonna warm these shadows up just a touch. Now if we look over here, we can see that this has kind of a blue tint in it. It's a little bit blue, and again, it's really hard to tell, but when you adjust it and you bring up the warmth in the shadows, you can see. So that's obviously blue. bring it up, and now we're back to more of a natural brown, which is kind of the color that his hair should be. And then we have the mid-tones, so you can go back and forth. And whenever I color, I love to just go back and forth on like everything, because you don't really know what works and what doesn't until you try it. So as we can see, maybe I go colder, I go, okay, this does not look good. Maybe I go a little bit warmer and I say, okay, well now we're kind of a little bit more evened out, and we kind of lost that blue tone just a touch. For this image, let's just say that's what I want. I don't want that blue. We'll come into the highlights, mess around with it. Again, cold, not looking good. Warm looks fine, but I don't like how warm it gets right here. Now looking at this image, and this kind of just comes with color grading for a long time, you'll start to notice the small things. But looking at this, I can tell there's a little bit of green in this part of the image. So I'm gonna come up to here, the color head, I'm gonna adjust it, and see, now you can see the green is popping out a little bit more. And then if we come just like right there, even -2, we can see there's just a little bit of green that's been lost in here. Come to the yellow and blue, and again, we'll just move back and forth. And then we'll come to the cyan and red, move back and forth. Okay, that looks a little cyan, that looks a little red, obviously. But I think I'm liking where this image is at, and I know you guys are probably thinking like, this looks weird, but again, we're going for that extremely stylistic look. So this was before and this was after. Added a little bit of warmth into these skin tones, especially cold, a little bit warmer. It kind of made everything look a little bit more alive and a little bit more rich. So now let's move on to the film grain. This is awesome because there's so many different film grains. We'll come over here so you guys can see. You can adjust the amount of grain, but not only can you adjust the amount, we have also all these different types of film. So if you come into 8mm ISO 50, you can see there's more grain, and then the higher ISO you go, there will again be more grain. But every time you jump up from 8 to 16 to 35 to 65, you will lose some. So as we can see, there's almost no grain here, but if we go to 35mm, there's a little bit more, and we can maybe boost it up so you can see. But I'm a big fan. I don't love adding a ton of grain, but I really like the 35mm ISO 50 because you can see there's just a little bit of grain kind of running throughout our whole image, which I do like, especially if you're trying to do film emulation. But yeah, if you want to go crazy, 8mm ISO 500, just so much. But now let's focus on halation, and this is that red that outlines all the harsh parts of your image that everyone loves, especially for film emulation. And again, not only do they just have an amount, but they also have different profiles. So we have 8mm, and then we have 8mm no remjet. So 8mm is just going to be the 8mm film. And as we can see, it's kind of adding a full red color cast. On this specific image, there's not really any highlights for it to appear. But if we do a remjet, now we can see that it's just adding red like on the shadows and the highlights. So if you look at his nostril right here, kind of black to just bright red. Same with like the whole image. So halation, it's just super simple. If you want your stuff to really look like film, I'd recommend throwing it on. Not much with this clip, but I'll pop up a couple clips where the halation is very heavy. And now we will move on to the bloom. This is again kind of just a glow of the image that a lot of film has. So if we come into 8mm, we can see that we just have a little bit of glow. And this is just super simple. I mean, if you want to add glow to your image, it's very nice. It makes things very filmic. So if they're very clinically sharp, then I would definitely recommend adding this bloom. But yeah, we will just take it super 16. Just add just a touch. Now we'll go into film damage. Film damage is simply just adding little specks and things on the image. So if we watch it, you can see there's little specks that are popping up all around. We can even add just a ton so you can really see it. So yeah, you can see like, see if we can bounce through here. I think it's random, which is nice. But yeah, as you can see right here, just adding a ton of effects. So if you really want to also sell that film look, like that dirty, grungy film look, throw on some film damage. And you know what? Let's just keep on the Super 8 film damage. And now we have film breath. I'm a huge fan of this. I feel like it sells the effect so much, and this is one of the things that's very missed. And you can see it right here. It's like bouncing things from magenta and green shift a little bit to highlight the fact that the film isn't perfect. So if you really want to sell the film look, I recommend this. Maybe you don't do 8mm Super 8, it's super heavy, but 35mm, it just does it just a touch. And you can even bring it down. I'm actually gonna take off this film damage because it's kind of highlighting itself too much. But you can see it just ever so slightly shifts things like magenta and green. So I'm a big fan of that, especially for heavy film emulation. And gate weave is the second thing that I think really sells it. Gate weave is basically when you have the film running through a projector, it kind of bounces around a little bit. So if we can put this on 8mm, again, 8mm usually heightens everything because it's like the dirtiest and cheapest film. As you can see, it's jumping around quite a bit. You can see it very prominently on tripods because there is no camera movement in general, so this will add some. But let's leave it on. Overscan, not a big fan. This is basically adding like bars on the side, and there's just a ton of different ones. There's the Super 8. This is kind of the popular one. So we have the Super 8, adding that to the side, and I love that it moves. That's very nice. And if you want, my computer's gonna start not doing very well, but you can see now these right here are bouncing back and forth. Turn static gate on, they don't bounce, but this still moves. Then we have the neat normal, neat sharp, and this is just messing with the actual edges of the frame. And then you can do the exposure. I usually don't use that, but it is there if you want to use it, if you really want to emulate that 8mm. And then finally we have vignette, which is simple. I'm a big fan of vignettes. Let's bring the exposure down. Let's bring the size so we can see exactly what we're working with. Feather it out just a little bit. Just a touch. I just wanted to vignette around the edges, not necessarily around the middle of the frame. And then monitor, this is actually really cool. I've never seen kind of a plugin add this, but it has false color, which is really nice. And if you don't know what false color is, it's similar to the waveform, and it measures the levels of brightness in your image. So if something is red, that means it's clipped. If something's purple, that means it's black. So as you can see, we have clipped blacks right here, which we wanted, but it's nice to just see. And then clipping again, we can see that these are black. So this is like your zeros, your clipping information. Then we have output. This is kind of the total impact of the effect. So as you can see, this is just nothing. And then this is what we ended up to. A very punchy, harsh colors, which is what I wanted, especially for this specific scene, because it's like we're already close onto his mouth. It's a little bit uncomfortable. So kind of just selling that a lot. And then we have LUT generator. You can generate LUTs, and then obviously we just have options. But now let's move on to how to use it in more of a commercial sense. This clip, we're gonna focus obviously on the grade, but we're gonna focus heavily on how to fix things, because if we look again at the Rec 709, it's a little blue, exposure's not very good, like this is a little bright, this is a little dark, like it's just not the best image. So we're gonna focus on transforming it completely. So this time I'm gonna add 4, and I'm gonna do it on the 3rd, and then we will go to DEHANCER. Again, we'll have to switch the input, choose our camera. And for this one, I'm actually gonna go into film, and I'm gonna choose Portra 400. And then we'll go into the print, we'll come into glossy paper, because I just like the way that looks. And now we're looking at an image that's it's flat, there's no color, it's rough. So let's talk about how to fix it. First things first, for this specific image, I'm gonna go into node number 2. I'm gonna go into the HDR wheels, come into color space, switch it to the color space I filmed this in. And basically by doing that, when I shift the exposure, it's almost shifting as if how I exposed it in camera. And sometimes I like to just do this in the beginning just to see like what I'm working with, because this just looks like a mess. But if I bring this down, okay, I still have the clouds. If I bring this up, okay, I still have, you know, most of the detail here. So it's just nice to see like, okay, this is what we're working with. But yeah, we're gonna come into here. Let's bring the exposure up just a touch. As you can see, we're basically cramming so much data. We're basically cramming so much data into the top. It's like we're wasting like the whole waveform. And then now let's focus on temperature. As you can see, we're blue. So let's come here just a little bit. Tint, it's a little bit grain, so let's come here. And again, still really rough, so we got a lot of work to do. First things first, come in here, let's add a little bit of color so we can see like what exactly we're working with. Okay, tad bit more color. I don't love how blue this image is. So I'm gonna come into the color head, enable it, and now we're gonna start going crazy with these. First things first, I like to shift this, okay. Definitely don't want blue. Let's maybe go a touch yellow. Just bringing these yellows back in just a little bit. Also, horrible frame to catch them on. Let's get it right here. And now we can see there's a little bit of green, so let's come to the magenta, bring it just a tad bit magenta. And let's cyan, no, let's bring a little bit of red in here. And this is just like, honestly, I just do this with my eyes, just like what looks the most natural, because we can see this looks super blue. Now we got a little bit more data back, a little bit more richness in the skin. But as we can see, the shadows, they're a little bit blue. So I like to come into here, and again, we can shift blue or warm. And I'm gonna grab the shadow specifically. This is like the key to getting perfect white balance on all of your shots, even if you mess it up in the beginning like this, is we'll come into the shadows, because instead of just basically grabbing this whole white balance and going yellow or blue. Now everything's just blue. Or if we go, okay, I like this. I like the way his skin looks here. Well, now the whole sky is just yellow, so it doesn't look very good. So what we'll do is we'll come in here, we'll zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna look, okay, warm, cold. Obviously we don't want cold, so I'm gonna bring this up just a little bit. So now we're a little bit warmer, especially in the shadows, as you can see right here. Shadows, like his hair looks brown, and that's like the most important thing, is you don't want people's hair to look green or magenta. You want it to be the actual color it is, and this is where you kind of just look with your eyes. Using the waveform for this is pretty tough because it's more based on a personal opinion. So I'm really liking that. And now we can see that the towel is also not blue. Thinking about what's supposed to be white in your image and making it white, and trying to make it as close as you can. Because in the beginning, this was blue. It's not supposed to look like that. Now we're headed the right direction. Midtones, again, we can go back and forth. Blue, don't want. Yellow, don't want. So maybe we come like right here. Now the towel looks a little bit more white, but we didn't affect the brown in his hair. And now we will look at the highlights. So as you can see, we're adjusting the highlights, and it's like not affecting the towel or his hair, which is really nice. Because again, when we made the image all warm, it basically made the sky turn into just a yellow mess. So what we'll do is we'll bring it back just a little bit, because now we're at a wider, more clean looking image. So yeah, we started from this, which looks horrible, honestly. We actually started with this, which looks even worse, and then we adjusted the temperature and the tint. But this kind of gets us in a general direction. But if you really want to dial in your stuff, come into here, and that totally switched it from this kind of purple yellowish mess all the way to a nice clean looking image. Now we can focus on the exposure, because we're just missing out on so much data, especially in the background, and in the foreground it's just not super bright. And again, this shot is to kind of teach you how to problem solve. So I'm going to first go into film grain, because I don't love having this, and especially if we're trying to do a cleaner image, we don't want to have that film grain. But now it's time to get crazy. See how this looks? Okay, we'll leave it. And then we're going to come back into our black point and our white point, and as you can see, that's clipping. So we'll drop our blacks just a touch, that way we add a little bit more contrast to the image, kind of making him just a little bit more, just pop a touch more. And then I'm going to look at the whites. Okay, I'm kind of liking where the white point is at right now. We'll come into here, and as you can see, this is when this film compression is actually very helpful, because in the last shot we didn't really have anything that needed to be affected. But as you can see in this one, just by enabling it, we don't lose nearly any detail in his face. Like, it stays around the same, but look how much we're getting in the sky. So much. That looks so much better than just like this white mess. Turn this on. That is basically grabbing our brightest of brights and bringing them down. And so now what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna bring the impact up just a touch. This is kind of the overall effect of this. And then we'll mess with the white point. Okay, that's clipping it. That might be a little too much, so we'll bring it about right here. Tonal range, mess around with. This is now starting to affect him. So I'm going to go kind of as low as I can before it starts to really affect him. Right there, I'm really liking. Color density, let's bring that up. I think what you can do is, if you have a sky that's like this and it's fairly bright, adding a little bit of color density into it can really help, because then it helps it look like that. We can tell there's some clouds, but it doesn't look very good. But by adding color density, we see, okay, there's a lot of detail still in there, even though it looks almost the same. Also, I know this is a little bit unorganized, but this is how I do it, as it's just so much experimenting. It's doing this, realizing, okay, now this is good, let's go back to this, let's adjust this. Coloring is just experimenting, honestly. Like, it's just testing out so many different things. So I'm starting to really like this. And now we have this image, which is fine, it's better. Now that I'm noticing his towel is actually a little blue, so we're gonna go back into the color head. We're gonna grab these mid-tones and bring them up just a touch. Okay, so now we're here. It's looking decent. Now what I'm gonna do is go into number one, and this is an addition to getting perfect white balance. So now we're actually gonna go and fix this. It still looks a little bit blue. So let's come into node number one. We will go to the log wheels, and now we're gonna mess with the mid-tones in the log wheels, but the actual color. So as we can see, this is looking a little bit blue still, so we're kind of sitting here. So we're gonna go the opposite way. So we're gonna go a little bit yellow. And we can see that even that right there took us from blue to white, and we can maybe even go a little bit further. Blue to white. And it honestly fixes skin just a little bit. It's crazy because before I did this little adjustment, I thought, oh, it's looking a lot better. But then when you do the adjustment, it's like, this looks so much better. It's like, what was I doing here? So this is why these log wheels for white balance I can't even express how important they are. Like, they're really good because normally if you shoot something that's too cold or too warm, you need to shift the whole thing with your temperature. So if you shoot something too cold, you grab your white balance and you bring it up, but now the whole image is warmer. So then you can go in selectively with the log wheels and adjust the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights separately. So if we look at his shadows, I see a touch of green in here. And the shadows are easy because you just push them really far one way and you can see exactly what it's gonna mess with. But I see a touch of green, so let's go into magenta. And now we kind of got rid of that green just a little bit. And then we will come into the highlights, and a good way, experimenting, just shift it. Like, okay, looking good, blah, blah, blah. And now if we look at our highlights, I'm thinking, okay, it's a little bit cold. So let's come here. So I just adjusted those highlights a little bit. We went from this, which we thought was a good looking image, or at least I did, and I assume maybe you thought, okay, this is better, and now we just made it look so much better. Like, we're looking a lot better than where we started. Now we're gonna go into number 2, go into the HDR, map them, sgamut.3 cine, gamma we're gonna go into slog3, and I'm gonna bring up this exposure just a touch, because I think we're crunching a little bit here in the shadows, so just bring it just a tad. And then I will grab the dark, so the darkest part of the image, bring them down, grab the lights, bring those down just a touch, and then overall exposure will bring it up just a little bit. So we're kind of keeping the detail in the sky, but adding just a little bit more detail in him. And now we're about to get crazy. The whole image is kind of just sitting in like a flat area. So let's see if we can fix that and make it look a little bit better. So let's come back in here. Let's see, how does it look? Exposure, blah. I'm gonna grab this, bring the exposure down just a little bit. And again, I know this image doesn't look amazing, but the whole point was we're taking something from bad to better. This is what happens when things go wrong. So like even this right here, I would say that passes. And for this clip specifically, I wanted to show you guys how I problem solve if I mess up the exposure a little bit or the white balance. But now let's move on to the final clip, which is black and white. We're gonna do 3 nodes, and you can do whatever. You can do 1, you can do 50. 3 is just usually a good number, and then 4 is a good number if I know I'm gonna be really messing with the white balance. And for this one, we are gonna do black and white. Man, bro caught me in a bad posture. Now we have a black and white film stock. We'll go into the print. We'll again add the glossy paper because I'm a big fan of it. Now we're looking at this image. Let's get cracking. Well, I will never be saying that again, by the way. But first, let's bring up the exposure just a touch. We have quite a bit of detail to play with. Not much we can really do in here because the temperature doesn't really matter. We can close that. And now we'll focus on the contrast boost. So with black and white, I see a lot of people, their whole image sits in gray. This one right here, I would say that's all just gray. Like there's no blacks and there's no whites. But with black and white, you should really push the limits in a sense of deep blacks and bright whites. So we'll come into contrast. We'll just bring this up right there. That's so much better already. I don't want to be like clipping everything to the point where I bring this up and this is just muddy. And I'm going to just move straight onto the expand. So I'm going to grab the black point and I'm just going to drop it. I want anything that should be black, like this right here, I need that to be black. So see how it's kind of just a little bit muddy of a gray? Let's drop it to black. Again, let's look at the whites. And I don't really want the sky to be clipping, so I don't want it to be like that, but I don't want it to be like sitting in this, again, just gray. So we'll grab this and we'll bring it up to the point where it's about to clip, right there. So as you can see, added quite a bit of crunch into our image. Now we're gonna go into the film compression, and we're actually gonna do the opposite. We're gonna bring it up. So the last time we used the film compression to kind of help keep things down and keep things in the lower highlight range. Now we're doing the opposite. I'm gonna grab the tonal range and bring it all the way here. So as you can see right here, we're bringing up our whites. It's just getting a little bit crunchier again. This looks decent, but I would probably come into number 1, go into my log wheels, grab my shadows, drop them just a little bit, highlights, bring them up just a little bit, and then bring up the midtones. The nice thing about the log wheels is I would say it's fairly dialed, because it's not just the whole image. If you bring up the gamma, it kind of brings up everything, even the shadows, basically changing the whole image, versus the log wheels. If we bring up the midtone, it doesn't touch right here, these shadows. They're glued to the bottom, which is very nice. Log wheels are a huge game changer. If you need minor adjustments for levels in your videos, use the log wheels. I promise you, you will see so much of a difference in your work. It won't be so muddy. I feel like when you use the regular color wheels, it kind of just makes everything muddy, like what we saw earlier. If I want to bring my blacks down, instead of doing the lift, where now, okay, it kind of just made everything darker, I can take the log wheels, do the shadow, and it'll specifically crunch those blacks, the things that I want to be black, not the whole image. You can do basically all of these in the DEHANCER plugin. However, I am personally more familiar with the log wheels, and a lot of the work I do is very punchy and very stylistic. So hopefully you guys learned some things, and hopefully it wasn't just me coloring clips that look bad. I thought they all looked pretty good. Honestly, now the more I look at this one, the less I like it. It looks a little bit pink, so we can just come in here, grab our midtones, make them a little less pink, grab our highlights, make them maybe a little bit more green, and that looks better. But I just want to say thank you all for watching. I'm looking at the recording and we're at 57 minutes. I don't know how long this video will be. If you made it to the end, congratulations. This was probably like one of the most boring videos I've ever done. But I really wanted to educate people on how to color as well as how to problem solve, because that's like one of the biggest things is when you shoot something and you just cook it before you can even edit. It's like you just shut down and you don't know exactly. I don't even know what to do. It just, my whole image looks blue. So this second clip, this one, I think should hopefully be very beneficial because it teaches you it's okay if you mess up. You can still do quite a bit, especially in 10-bit. I just want to say thank you all for watching. This is a super simple video. I've been very busy recently, a lot of traveling. So I thought I'd just pop in here, give you guys a little bit of a tutorial on how I like to color. And thank you to DEHANCER for giving me this plugin. It is so powerful. And if you want to get into any sort of film emulation, this is by far the best option. And it's also really good to just use for commercial work because again, we cleaned up this whole image and almost just DEHANCER by itself. So yeah, thank you so much, DEHANCER. Thank you for reaching out. And yeah, I will see you guys. I'm thinking about switching the uploading schedule to Tuesday. I won't lie, because I usually film my videos over the weekends and then I have to grind the edit on Sunday. So be prepared for that. If you made it this far into the video, like, comment, subscribe, and comment the word Sony if you made it this far into the video, and I will follow you on Instagram. I don't know, I'll do something for you because this is crazy. But thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next Monday.